You're listening to The Mountain Spirit, a podcast of Christian Appalachian Project, where we share inspirational stories of faith, service, and compassion. I'm a firm believer that we're all connected by our shared humanity, and that finding that intersection sometimes just means having a conversation. Today we get to hear from Matt Smith. He's the lead pastor at Believers Church in Johnson City, Tennessee, and also a sociology professor at Big Sandy Community and Technical College in Prestonsburg. Matt will also share with us how substance abuse impacted the trajectory of his life. According to a paper published by the National Library of Medicine, in Central Appalachia, many of the barriers to substance abuse treatment are shared with other rural and impoverished areas, including a lack of access to health care and a lack of healthcare providers with specialized training. Parts of Appalachia also present their own considerations, including the challenges of fostering trust and encouraging treatment seeking in communities with dense, long-term place-based social and family networks. There are ways in which rural life, poverty, identity, and values in Appalachia have influenced substance abuse and treatment, but Matt's story is also a story of hope and transformation. And we're excited to hear from him today as he shares with you his story of being an Appalachian. Hi, Matt. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's good to be here.
Well, we're so glad to have you on today. So folks who listen regularly probably wonder why my voice sounds so weird and crazy today. I've been fighting a cold this week, but I'm certainly excited to be here with you today and would not have missed this opportunity to hear your story and to hear about your experiences there with your church in Johnson City, Tennessee. And I know that we have just had folks down there on the ground helping following after Hurricane Helene. So we want to just jump right in today so we have plenty of time to hear from you, Matt. So we mentioned already that you're live in Tennessee right now. So can you tell me where you were born and raised, and how did you end up in Tennessee if you're not originally from Tennessee? So tell us a little bit about your backstory.
Sure, happy to do so. I am actually from Elizabethton, Tennessee, Carter County, which is actually the area that some of your team recently came down to. I've lived in Appalachia my entire life. I literally tell people that I've lived on the same road because I've lived in North Carolina, Tennessee, and Kentucky. But if you look at I-26 and Highway 23, it literally is. I've just made 3 different lefts my entire life and lived about 5 hours apart total.
Wow. So how did your family story, like growing up where you did, shape the person that you are now? And can you tell us a little bit about your family, siblings, and that sort of thing?
I grew up in East Tennessee. My parents were married for about 20 years. They've been divorced for about 25 years now. I have a brother that's a couple years younger than me, and then a sister and a brother that are significantly younger than me. They're both in high school. And grew up in a conservative Christian home, didn't experience a whole lot outside of Appalachia for the first 17 or 18 years, which made me a very curious person. And at this point, I've been able to travel and see a lot of the world and have a lot of great experiences. But I'm still very close to my mom and my dad and stepmom. And so, in fact, all 3 of them attend the church that I currently pastor, which is a huge blessing.
Yeah. So you talked about moving and kind of living in the same area. What took you from your home to North Carolina and to Kentucky?
Okay, so I went to college for a little while in North Carolina, lived in Tennessee until I was 18, moved to North Carolina for college for a little while, ended up moving back to North Carolina from Tennessee again years later. While I was working on my master's, I was actually going to school in Tennessee, but just crossing over the state line to go. So I lived in both the Hendersonville and Weaverville areas of North Carolina, still Central Appalachia. Again, spent most of my life in Elizabethton and Johnson City, Tennessee. But then I lived in Prestonsburg for 11 years. And that's when I went to teach at Big Sandy, and then eventually also pastored Destination Community Church there in downtown Prestonsburg.
So Appalachia is home for you. So for people who may not have been to the Appalachian Mountains or been to the region or know the people, can you paint a picture for us of what it means to you to be Appalachian?
I would say, very loyal people, very prideful people, willing to help their neighbor out in any situation, very self-reliant. There's so good people, and there's also an awareness, I think, specifically, I think of the places that I've lived in Eastern Kentucky of maybe being neglected to some degree by the rest of the country, or maybe there being a negative perception of us. I say us because I really still consider Eastern Kentucky to be a very important part of who I am. And that's something that I noticed whenever I lived there. I think East Tennessee and Western North Carolina are the same, but not quite to the same extent. That there is a little bit of that negative stigma, which is very unfortunate. But very good people, very hospitable, very dependable, going to look out for their own. Just a wonderful place to live, a wonderful place to raise a family.
Yeah, I definitely know that we saw that when we were on the ground with Hurricane Helene. And we're going to get to that, and just all how you described. We definitely saw self reliance and helping your neighbor and hospitality and all the things. But I know that you talked a little bit about stigma and sort of the negative portrayals of Appalachia. The news has been full of stories for decades now, really, about substance abuse in rural America. But can you share how substance abuse touched your life and how you broke free from that?
Sure. Yeah, I come from a history of addiction on both sides, and I did not drink or use drugs much in high school, very very little. But just going through some things as I was starting college, a lot of it had to do with deconstructing and stepping away from my faith, and started smoking pot and drinking. Used other drugs recreationally over the years, but none of the harder drugs ever really took. But drinking did, and I'm kind of I've been told I'm a little too serious most of the time, and I'm obsessive compulsive, wound pretty tight. So drinking was something that just always felt like it kind of created a balance, I guess you could say. And the problem was I just couldn't really stop once I started, and that was the pattern for about 12 years. And again, other drugs came into and out of the picture, but nothing that was ever what I would consider to be an addiction. But alcohol was my real struggle. So all through my 20s, the mistakes that I made, the obstacles that I had, friendships or relationships that I lost, almost everything could be reduced to my issues with alcohol.
Yeah, and so how did you get on the path to recovery?
I married my wife, and she lived in Tennessee while I lived in Kentucky, so our dating life was not super realistic. We didn't date for long before we got married. And I think it was a reality check for both of us whenever we got married, and she recognized kind of what my day-to-day life was on a regular basis before or after marriage. And I had a stepdaughter as well, who's now 18. She was 5 at the time whenever we married. And it just caused a lot of problems in my marriage. And I was already just at a place, we'd started going to church, and I was in a place where I really felt sick of it. I was afraid. I didn't know how to quit. And after a series of just really bad arguments and things looking like divorce, I made the decision to quit. And she knew that I was serious about it because I sought help, and I had never done that before. So I started going to a 12-step faith-based recovery, Celebrate Recovery, in Ashland, Kentucky, every Monday night, and I'd committed. I was finished, and I knew that, and I just needed some help, some guidance, some accountability, and some to understand myself. And so I committed to that, and the first 3 months were some of the hardest months of my life. A lot of discovery, a lot of importance, a lot of growth in my faith. Very, very critical time, but very, very hard. I had actually scheduled a trip with students to Paris, Amsterdam, and London, during that time, which made it incredibly difficult because I was around drugs and alcohol on that trip just because of the culture, especially Amsterdam. But then after that 3 months, there were a couple years that were hard, not overwhelming, but hard. And I just continued to work the steps and received a call into ministry and went to seminary, started seminary, and eventually it did get easier to the point where after a few years I really felt free of the addiction. But it was definitely a very difficult journey out of it.
Yeah. So that's your story, and I've heard great things about Celebrate Recovery in a lot of communities in which CAP serves, and of course even here in Lexington where I live. What do you think the community needs, like where you currently serve as a pastor, that may be missing in terms of addressing substance abuse in local communities, or is it just people have to get to the is it that the services are there and people just have to connect to the services, or is it that it's lacking and there is something that's needed in the community?
Well, I mean, first there has to be a level of brokenness that is unlike anything you've ever experienced. There truly has to be a rock bottom. I'm never going to do this again. You also have to have support around you. My wife it was a non-negotiable for us if we were going to continue to be married. Now we've been married for 13 years, and I've been sober almost 12. And then also where we tend to fail is anybody can go through 30 days or 60 days and go through treatment if it's inpatient, or they can start going to meetings. But I think really the transitional part is where we fail. The restoration of dignity, fighting the shame, giving people purpose, meaning a trade, some kind of occupation. We're also often after treatment sending people back into the environments that are, it's hard to stay sober if mom and your sister and her boyfriend are both, or all three of those people are using. If you're just going back to those same, and that's the thing about some of Appalachia. When you look at Eastern Kentucky and areas of West Virginia, you've got these pockets of poverty and addiction, and that's what people are having to go home to. And they just don't have the willpower or the skill set they can have all the faith in the world, and that's wonderful, but you have to be around the right people. And I mean, I had to just cut people out of my life, at least for a period of time. And there were times we were in restaurants or we like to listen to live music, where I just had to get up and leave. And it was painful, it was difficult, but if there's a tremendous amount of shame from messing up time after time after time, and then you're also going back into a toxic environment where no one is discouraging you from using or drinking or whatever, it's almost impossible to succeed.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hello, friends of CAP. This year, CAP turns 60, and we couldn't be more excited. This marks 60 years of building hope, 60 years of transforming lives, 60 years of sharing Christ's love through service in Appalachia. And we plan to be here for many more years to come. In celebration of our anniversary, we have created a special website where you can view the CAP archives and experience our story throughout the first 60 years of CAP. Thank you for being part of our story. Visit us at wearecap.org. That is wearecap.org.
Let's shift gears a little bit here, because you ended up as a pastor or in ministry. So where was the transition from you were struggling with substance abuse, but you're committed to your marriage and committed to making some changes, to being called into ministry? What was that calling like for you?
I was actually in ministry for a short period of time whenever I was a teenager. That's when I really felt called into ministry, and it was after that I really started to struggle with my faith, or during that, I should say, that I really started to struggle with my faith. So I knew at one time in my life that it was there. And Beth and I had started a college small group in our home, right, not long after I got sober. And Toy Adams was actually in college at that time, and he'd asked me if I wanted to speak at a small Methodist church. I reluctantly said yes, but when I did, I knew. And I knew I was supposed to be in ministry. I knew that calling had never left my life. And even when I quit drinking, I knew something was around the corner. I just didn't know exactly what. It was just a total full surrender, like second conversion moment where everything in my life truly changed. And I desperately desired Jesus like nothing else in my life. And that's still the case. I'm 43. That's still the case every day of my life. And so when I sensed that call into ministry, I wanted to go to seminary. I wanted to learn more. I'm kind of just education natured, and so it made sense. My wife was highly supportive, and so I went to United Theological Seminary in Dayton. During this time, the lead pastor at my church had spoken to me a little bit about the possibility of considering being the lead pastor there because we were growing, and he was a full-time dentist, still is. And just everything lined up the way God intended. And I ended up becoming the pastor at Destination Community Church. I was there for 3.5 years. It was wonderful. And I've never sensed, any call away or doubted God's calling on my life. I think for years I just kind of tried to drink it away, and it didn't work. But so that's really kind of how that's kind of how I've been placed into where I am now.
And you're now the lead pastor at Believers Church in Johnson City. Is that correct?
Yeah, we decided after 3.5 years at DCC, my wife was going through, she has an incredible story herself through her own mental health journey. She was pregnant with our son, really started to struggle. We didn't have any family in the area. It got really, really bad. And I've had 2 full-time jobs for a long time, and it just became too much. And so we knew that if we moved back to East Tennessee, that we would at least have the family support. It was a complete act of obedience. There was no church here that I thought wanted me or anything like that. So Believers Church in Johnson City was going through a transition at the time. Their pastor had resigned. It was 2020. There was 35 people in the church at the time, and it just seemed like it was a perfect fit. We've been here 4 years now, and there's over 200 people, and it's just everything has went the way that it's supposed to go, and God's really just blessed us with the obedience of moving here back to East Tennessee.
Yeah. So you mentioned East Tennessee. We've mentioned it a couple of times now that CAP has sent disaster relief staff down following the devastation of Hurricane Helene. What did you witness in the community, and what brought you hope, and what still brings you hope as we see not just in East Tennessee, but North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, other folks still trying to recover following this sort of spat of natural disasters?
Well, it's kind of strange because I was actually in Kentucky whenever the storm happened. I was working. I still drive up there once a week to teach at the college, and my wife continues to call me about being careful on my way home. And I'm thinking, because I've seen flooding living in Eastern Kentucky, and then we helped out a lot in 2022 in the Whitesburg area. Our church did, and I just really didn't think much about it because it just didn't look bad in Eastern Kentucky, and I thought it would be worse there. So all this stuff was happening. By the time I got home, there was a lot of damage. And we know a lot of people that have lost their homes, or at the very least were without electricity or water, or had some damage, and it was just unbelievable. But very much like what I've seen on a lesser scale in Eastern Kentucky, going back to Appalachian people, just a lot of people coming together, a lot of churches coming together, in a heated election season, people putting all their differences aside and just really trying to work together to get people back in their homes, to start to strategize about rebuilding homes, infrastructure that's been damaged or ruined. And it's been incredible to see something like this, because whenever there's a natural disaster in an area like Appalachia, it's different than it is in some other areas, because you're talking about families that in some cases have land that has went back 4, 5, 6 generations. Not people necessarily moving into a suburban area of Florida or in an area of California where maybe there are regularly wildfires. These are people that this is everything they've ever known that's absolutely destroyed. So it's been very hopeful. I think it's an opportunity to show the beauty of the gospel. And that's my hope and prayer as we look at the next year to 18 months to 2 years of restoration.
And you mentioned still coming to Prestonsburg to teach sociology. How did you end up in sociology? Like, you have divinity, sociology, just doing so. Where did that come into your life?
Every bit of it was just preparation for the future, and I've always been comfortable with speaking and teaching and learning. For some reason, I was really good at college. I'm not very good at a lot of things, but college was something that I could drink and do. And so sociology made sense because it was so broad that I felt like if I get tired of a particular area of focus, I can focus in a different area. And here I am. I've been teaching for 16 years, and I'm still enthusiastic and interested every day in the material. But looking at it now, every bit of the path was to get me where I am today, with currently and hopefully for a long time with Believers Church. But went to Northeast, to a community college here in Blumpville, Tennessee. Went to ETSU for a bachelor's and a master's. Made incredible relationships, had a great experience, and then moved to Eastern Kentucky with the intention of starting my doctorate in rural sociology at UK a year later. And as they say, if you take a break, sometimes it's hard to go back to school. So I'm currently, I've been accepted for my doctorate of ministry at Asbury there in Wilmore, Kentucky, but I don't know what I'm going to end up doing. We're in a very busy season of ministry as well. I have small kids, so I'm really just trying to prayerfully determine what it is I'm supposed to do.
Yeah. So what's rural sociology?
Just sociology in small communities.
Mm-hmm.
My goal for the rest of my life, and like I said, God had other plans, but my goal for the rest of my life was to study Appalachia and to study just local culture, poverty, the resilience of Appalachian people. That's what I planned on doing for the rest of my life, and just didn't work out that way, thankfully.
Yeah, that's a good segue to our next questions, which is that lots of people have never visited Appalachia. So what is a stereotype that if you could talk to them that you would love to correct?
I would definitely say that there aren't intelligent people, or the way that people are slow, people are stupid, people are behind. I think that's just incredibly misleading. Some of the most intelligent people that I know, and I know people from all over this country, obviously, just from relationships over time, and then other countries as well. Just very smart people, very resilient. That's probably the whole like hillbilly thing, I think, would be the biggest stereotype. It's just not true.
Yeah. You mentioned sociology. We talked about coming out of substance abuse. You talked about education, going for a degree in divinity, 2 degrees like education. Do you see, in addition to your faith, what the through line is to all of those different seasons of your life, or is there a through line for that?
I think it was Kierkegaard that said that life is to be lived forward but understood backwards, and everything for me draws back to my relationship with Jesus. That's really all I have at the end of the day. And so my family of origin, substance abuse, my upbringing in church, a lot of which I would, come to reject later, to the experiences with travel, to meeting my wife, to teaching sociology, all seems to have connected to make me the servant that I need to be. And when I say that, I'm not just talking about pastoring. I'm talking about, in fact, before that, being a husband and a dad, and living my life out of that place. We made the decision, Beth and I did years ago, that we were gonna lead from a very open, vulnerable place. I've not always been that way. Recovery meetings kind of taught me how to just be myself and be very raw and open about who I am regarding my struggles and shortcomings and those kinds of things. So everything has really played together in those ways. I mean, I can't even wait to look back at 50 or 60 and see the work I can imagine living another way.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Your generosity has a direct and positive impact in the lives of people in need in Appalachia every day. It is the unwavering support of faithful friends like you that make this work possible. Many of our supporters are beginning to plan and envision what kind of legacy they want to leave to support the causes that are near and dear to their hearts. CAP is happy to provide a safe and easy experience for people to create a will and support CAP through non-cash gifts. Through our partnership with Free Will, CAP offers our donors the ability to create a will online and alter it at no charge. Our partnership with Free Will also includes their Smart Giving Suite, which allows donors to give through their IRA, donor advised funds, and stock online, in addition to creating a will for free. In recent years, Appalachia has faced unrelenting challenges, including the pandemic, inflation, and back-to-back natural disasters. You can make a life-changing impact and leave a legacy of hope in Appalachia. To learn more about non-cash giving opportunities, please visit christianapp.org/more ways to give.
We've talked about a wide range of things, and I'm always watching the time and how quickly a half an hour show goes by. When you think of substance abuse in the community, where do you think, because Celebrate Recovery just has such a testament of the success of the program, transformation. Outside of that program, what other kinds of things do you think could be brought into the community to help around that issue? But then also, where do you see the faith community making a difference in Appalachia, maybe to fight against some of the stereotypes or just some of the challenges with poverty and those kind of things? Where does the faith community fit into, whether it's substance abuse or poverty or making sure, folks have what they need? How do they address that in Appalachia?
It's not enough to get someone sober, because that's really hard to sustain. And it's not even enough to teach them the 12 steps, because that's definitely your toolkit. It's really important. But there has to be a restoration of dignity. And so a couple points there. First, from the faith perspective, you asked about faith communities. Jesus restores that dignity. And if you know that you are loved, if you know that you have a fresh start, if you know that his mercies are new every morning, if that really sinks in, there's a profound impact that has. I don't care what kind of background you come from, based on faith or lack thereof. It just changes who you are when you really take that in. If you hear it just kind of as a, kind of Bible Belt symbolism, it doesn't have as much of a changing factor. But if you truly take it in, it changes you. But then also, people need something to do. They need jobs. They need an emotional support system. So the church and other entities within the community can be that support system, because sometimes your family's not there if you come from a situation where other people are addicted and they're going to give you a hard time for trying to better yourself, which is a very normal thing, that's incredibly difficult. And the shame just continues to resurface. But if a person can get a job and they can start to get some praise for the fact that they're doing well, they can sometimes, they can get their kids back. They can watch money go in as they're paying their own bills, and instead of that money going other places. So to not have to ask other people for help as you start to become more self-sustaining, to know that you're showing up for your kids' activities and that you're being there and those relationships are being restored, that's kind of the missing piece. And there are some organizations that are doing this really well, that are doing that transitional piece very well. It's just that we can't send people places for 30 days or 60 days or 6 months or a year or however long and expect to just drop them off, back into their lives and expect them to have the willpower to stay sober. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah. I think you've hit on so many wonderful points that I hope our audience listening today will consider in their own community. We just try to encourage people to do something wherever you are. You may not be in Eastern Kentucky or in Appalachia, but wherever we are, we can be the hands and feet of Christ. We can love on our neighbors and lift them up and encourage folks that we see struggling in our communities. What is your hope for the region in the years to come? You were born in Appalachia, you stayed in Appalachia, and you're raising your family there. What is your hope for the region?
Well, again, I go to the spiritual, and not because I'm a pastor, but because my heart beats for Jesus, and my hope is just awakening for revival. And when I say that, I'm not talking about an ongoing church service, but instead people turning their hearts toward a relationship with Jesus, because it does truly heal everything. And when the heart is restored and going in the right direction, everything else follows.
That's a great word of encouragement. We're already to our last question. Our time is up. Matt, that time flew by. We ask all of our guests this last question. I hope you'll indulge me. Our mission statement at Christian Appalachian Project is building hope, transforming lives, and sharing Christ's love through service in Appalachia. Hope, transformation, love, and service. Which one of these resonates with you the most when you think of Appalachia?
I'm going to cheat. I'm going to say transformation, because I believe that it will. I believe the other three are going to come along. If transformation, that, what did you say? Hope, service, and love.
Love.
They'll come along. Yeah. If you're transformed, everything else comes along.
Awesome. Matt, it's been a pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Our guest today has been Matt Smith, the lead pastor at Believers Church in Johnson City, Tennessee. He's also a sociology professor at Big Sandy Community and Technical College in Prestonsburg, Kentucky. We hope you've enjoyed the show today, and we'll check out next week's episode. Tell your friends to check us out too. You can follow the work of Christian Appalachian Project on all of our social media channels, and you can also find the podcast at wearecap.org/podcast, or wherever you get your favorite podcast. Be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. We'll see you next week.